Hi there, smart drivers. Talking to you tonight about air brakes, CDL air brakes. If you're going to truck driving school and driving a vehicle with air brakes, we're going to show you how to do the pre-trip inspection, what you need to do for the in-cab inspection part of the CDL air brakes, and get you that ticket first time. Stick around. We'll be right back with that information. Hi there, smart drivers. Welcome back. Rick with Smart Drive Test talking to you tonight about air brakes. So the way it works here is I will do a presentation on air brakes, and then after the presentation we'll come back and we will have the remainder of the time, which is about 45 minutes, for question and answers. Question and answers on any aspect of driving. Passing a driver's test, going for your driver's test, fear and anxiety around your driver's test, being a safer, smarter driver after you get your license, gaining experience. And if you want to get your CDL license, we can help you with that too. What to expect in a CDL career as a truck or bus driver. And of course, tonight we're also competing with, I think it's Super Bowl. I'm pretty sure it's Super Bowl. So we're competing with them too. So Kristen's here. Fuad is here as well. Hello. And Rocky's tuning in from Windsor, Ontario, where they are in lockdown because of COVID. Yes, it's a kind of a crazy world we live in right now for sure, and we're not sure how long this is going to continue. Bricks for Wheels, that's Corey. Corey is the moderator and keeps all the bad people out and profanity and whatnot. You know, you have a fairly big YouTube channel when people want to start spamming you for whatever reason. You know, it is the internet's fun place to hang out for some people. So, air brakes. I am good, Rocky, and yourself, my friend. Jason is here as well. So if you're just tuning in, let us know where you're tuning in from, what class of license you're going for, whether you're getting started on a CDL license, whether you're brand new, getting started driving, just in the beginning stages of getting in the car and getting going. I know for some of you are. I know that some of you have trepidation around getting your driver's license in the wintertime because we are, for those of us in the northern hemisphere, that is, very much in winter and in snow and ice, and some of you are. And I do encourage you to go and get your license and take your test at this juncture because it's going to be easier. First, it's going to be easier to get a test because a lot of people are going to postpone until the summertime when it's going to be really tough to get a slot because they're backed up. They're already talking about that in Ontario. And I was just reading an article that came across my feed here that said in Ontario they're waiving the test for seniors over 80 because some of you may or may not know that once you're 80 years old, in most places, states and provinces, you have to have a driver's test. Well, they're waiving that in Ontario because they're so backed up with driver's tests, and they're on lockdown right now, so they're not doing any tests, so it's going to be even worse, and I'm not sure how they're going to catch up. I have suggestions about how they can do that, but it's tough to take a driver's test. The other thing about taking your driver's test in the wintertime is it's easier to pass the test. It's less exact, okay? So know that as well. So Kirsten is in New Brunswick. Fuad, can you do your demonstrations driving to be used in New York City? Yes, absolutely, they can be used in New York City. Talk to Margaret, who's here as well. She's training and working towards doing her driver's test, and she is in Brooklyn. So ask her, and she'll have some feedback for you too. Anastasia, tuning in from Seattle. Hello, that's awesome. And my friend Tim is here from DriveSmart BC. If you have any information you want to know about driving, legalities of driving, legislation, law, case law and case law, black letter law and case law, go over to Tim's site there if you're in the province of British Columbia and have a look at the information there. Excellent forum, excellent information. Tim and I were actually having a discussion about U-turns and center lines and what the purpose of those are. And both of us, leading experts in the field, are both, we don't have a definitive answer about that. We're we're not completely in agreement, but we're discussing it and trying to come up with an answer. Tim is saying here in BC it's a driver's medical every 2 years starting at age 80. Yes, so they haven't started doing mandatory driving tests in the province of British Columbia, but they do have it in Ontario. And there is also some discretion around that, Tim, in terms of 80 years old and doing driver's tests. They can decide whether they're going to do a driver's test. It's just a medical, whether they make them do a learner's or those types of things. So there is a bit of discretion in terms of the people who are putting them through that. All that boring legal stuff. No, actually, sometimes it's pretty exciting, Tim. I have to say that it's really exciting because a lot of about law, as you and I both know, is what's not written in the books and the legislation and those types of things. My friend Frank is here, and Frank, now remind me, you're from Michigan, or is that another Frank? I think that's you, isn't it? And Corey has put the video up there for how to pass the driver's test on snow and ice in the winter. And Anastasia, I'm practicing for the test, and your videos have been a great help, and that's awesome. Brenton is here from Ohio, the Buckeye. Brilliant. So, okay, so we'll get over to the PowerPoint presentation. We'll get that out of the way, and then we'll come back and answer any questions you have about driving tests, those types of things. Here we go. There we go. All right, so CDL pre-trip inspection for air brakes. Head over to the Smart Drive Test website. Corey will put the link up for you. I have written an ebook called Air Brakes Explained Simply. You can pick that up for about $15 over there, and it will go through absolutely every aspect of air brakes, explaining the pre-trip inspection, the exact wording for the pre-trip inspection. It will go through a list of every valve in the system. It will give you a 100 practice test questions that you could take online. It's an ebook, so you can have it on your phone. You can scroll through it, and it's divided into must-know information for the test that you have to know, should know, and could know. So it's broken into those 4 aspects, and you can look at it, look at the first 20 pages of that book over at the Smart Drive Test website if you're considering purchasing it. So, for those of you new to Smart Drive Test, my name is Rick August. I drove truck in the 1990s. While I was going to university at the University of Melbourne in Australia, I drove coaches for Greyhound. I became a licensed commercial driving instructor in 1997. 2006, I graduated from the University of Melbourne with my doctorate in legal history, which is the study of policing, courts, and prisons. My expertise is in policing as it relates to traffic. About 5 years ago, I started the YouTube channel, which has been wildly successful, and we're working to scale that this year, really focusing on that and extending our reach and helping more people to pass the driver's test, become a safer, smarter driver, and earn a CDL license and start a career as a truck or bus driver. So that's all of that information about me. New video this week. I can't speak clearly. All right, so finding black ice, locating it, knowing where it is, and then tips on how to drive on it. And I do use a case study of me having a little trouble keeping my vehicle on the road a couple of weeks ago on my trip down to Victoria, BC. So I did have a little spin out on the road there. So have a look at that video as well. So demonstrating competency. You're not determining in terms of your pre-trip inspection for CDL air brakes, you're not determining if the vehicle is safe. You're demonstrating a competency. You are demonstrating that you know what the names of the major components are on the vehicle, and you're testing to know whether they work. So for the purposes of your license, getting your license on a CDL air brake equipped vehicle, you're demonstrating that you know how to check stuff. And you're checking that you're showing the DMV examiner that you know how to do that. So that's what you're doing, okay? Sequence, so you need to know a few basic things about air brake systems. You need to know what air brake chambers are, and air brake chambers are one of the fundamental components of an air brake system. These brake chambers convert air pressure into strong mechanical force. So in other words, they take air pressure, which is like a garden hose, except it's air pressure, and it's all over the place and kind of wild. It harnesses that and then allows it to push out on a push rod to apply the brakes. There's also spring force in here, which is confusing students in terms of air brakes. A lot of instructors will use the wording spring brakes, and they're not spring brakes. Spring pressure is the force that applies the brakes, and I'll talk a little bit more about that after I get finished the presentation. So spring brakes are used interchangeably with parking and emergency brakes. So think about it this way. On your car, you have 3 different types of brakes. You have a brake pedal, you're going up and down the road, you stop the vehicle. You park the vehicle, you put the parking brake on, at least we hope you put the parking brake on, and then if you're going up and down the road and you lose your brakes, then you can use the parking brake as an emergency brake. Now on your car, it's manual. You have to do it to bring the vehicle to a stop. On a large commercial vehicle, it has going up and down a foot brake, it has parking brakes, and it has emergency brakes. The only difference between your car and an air brake equipped vehicle is that the emergency brakes on a big large vehicle, if you lose air pressure in the system, they come on automatically. They don't come on by the driver determining that, okay? So you need to know the signs and signals that will show you that you're losing air pressure out of your air brake equipped vehicle. So first question is, what is a brake? So brakes on large commercial vehicles are exactly the same as what is on your passenger vehicle. The only difference is that most of the brakes on large commercial vehicles are drum brakes. They're not disc brakes, and disc brakes are widespread on passenger vehicles. Not quite on large commercial vehicles, however, they are beginning to make inroads. Essentially, a brake is one piece of material that rubs against the moving wheel or hub, creates friction, and brings it to a stop. And this is exactly what happens in your vehicle. And you can see on the image there at the top that in the old days of wagons, that it was just a long lever that was pushed down against the wheel and brought the vehicle to a stop. Modern air brake systems have brake shoes inside a hub. As you can see down here, I don't know whether you can see the cursor on the screen or not. I don't think you can. But the brake shoes push out against the hub, create friction, and bring the vehicle to a stop. At least that's the hope and prayer. Okay? Basic components of an air brake system: air lines, a compressor which compresses and creates air pressure, the governor which controls the compressor, hoses, brake chambers, slack adjusters, and foundation brakes. And you need to know these basic components if you're going for a CDL air brake ticket. In this day and age, air brakes will not fail. And I had a smart driver come on the channel last week and told me that his air brakes failed. He ran into the curb and jumped the curb with his truck and then ran into a fire hydrant. And I'm about 98% positive that it was somebody playing Big Rig America, which is the video game. So I didn't want to educate him on air brakes and tell him that they probably wouldn't fail in real life. So they're all systems, braking systems, whether it's an air brake system or the hydraulic brakes on your car, are divided into a primary and secondary system. And if you take the cap off your master cylinder under the hood, you'll see in there that there are two chambers in there. Okay, one system is for the front and one system is for the rear. Air brakes are exactly the same. They're divided into two independent subsystems. All right, so primary is everything behind the driver, and secondary is everything in front of the driver. All right, so they are fail safes, and there's a lot of fail safes, and Corey will put the video up for you on why air brakes won't fail, and it'll go into all of those details in more. It'll go into all those details for you. That's what I was trying to say. Okay, the only failing of any brake system, whether it's a hydraulic braking system or an air brake system, is brake fade. And essentially what happens is that you overuse the brakes on a downhill, you overheat the brakes, and they start to melt into a big pile of goo. The metal expands away from the shoes, and you get reduced braking. And eventually, if you continue to do that, they will smoke, set on fire. You can Google YouTube videos on air brakes failing on big trucks and see them going down the hill. They're smoking because the driver has overused them and has not done downhill braking correctly, or they simply weren't trained correctly and they lost their brakes. So when you go down the hill, all of these vehicles, these large commercial vehicles, have auxiliary braking systems on them, whether that's an engine brake, an exhaust brake, or it's a driveline retarder. A lot of the European trucks will have driveline retarders on them, which are either electric or hydraulic. Most of them in Canada and North America have engine brakes on them, engine retarders. So you simply, in the mountains here where I live, most of them are going to be 13 and 18 speeds. You put it into fifth gear, put the engine brake on full, and down over the hill you go, and you're going to be fine. Okay, in this day and age, as I said, modern air brake systems and retarders are really good, and Corey's put up those videos for you, so have a look at those as well. All right, so downhill braking, select the correct gear, engine brake on full, and if you're in a 13 or an 18 speed, put it in fifth gear with the splitter in low, and that'll get you down the hill safely. And the other thing about downhill braking, and this goes not just for tractor trailer drivers or bus drivers, this also goes for people towing trailers in the mountains and going down hills, people with RV trailers and those types of things. Same thing, you got to get it geared down, and a lot of these modern pickup trucks, if it's a 3/4 ton or a 1 ton, will also have auxiliary braking on them. So use that as well, because you can go down the hill 1,000 times too slow, but one time too fast, it might be your last. So just go slow. So when you're doing your CDL air brakes in cab, there's 5 tests that you have to do. You have to test the governor, that it kicks in at minimum pressure of 80, which means that it'll build pressure. Low air warning comes on above 60. The emergency brakes applied between 20 and 45. The compressor test, which is usually for most states and provinces a buildup of 50 to 90 pounds within 3 minutes at a high idle. And then at maximum pressure, which is usually about 135 pounds, you have a leak test to test the integrity of the system. So these are the 5 in-cab checks that you have to do as part of your pre-trip inspection when you go for your CDL test. All right. Most of the components on semi-trailers or trailers, pup trailers, which are the trailers go on the back of dump trucks, most of the components are the same as they are on the towing unit. The difference is that the towing unit of a trailer fitted with air brakes will have a tractor protection system, and you have to test the system. And you can go over to the Smart Drive Test website and just type in tractor protection valve, and that will come up. The emergency brakes apply between 20 and 45. You have to go out to the trailer and check that the trailer brakes have indeed applied, and there's no air leaking from the lines when you make a service brake application. So the bonus is that you can go over to the Smart Drive Test website and pick up your in-cab worksheet. And this is a worksheet for your state or province. You simply go through the manual, and most of the manuals you can search electronically. There's a video that accompanies this worksheet, and Corey will put that up for you, how to do the CDL air brake pre-trip inspection in cab. Look at that video, go through this sheet, and fill out the numbers for your particular state and province. If you have any difficulty or trouble filling that out, drop me an email, rick@smartdrivetest.com, and I'll definitely help you out. And you can find that checklist at smartdrivetest.com/pass CDL air brakes checklist, and you can get that checklist over there. All right, so just to recap, there's 1 brake on the system, 3 functions of 1 brake. The service brake's going up and down the road, which is essentially the brake pedal. There's a parking brake, as you have, same thing as on your car. Hold the brakes applied indefinitely while it's parked. And then the emergency brakes, which will bring the vehicle to a stop in the event that there's some failure in the braking system while you're going up and down the road. There's 2 power sources on the system, and oftentimes instructors will say spring brakes, and students walk away from the course going, what are they talking about? They're not spring brakes. There's not another system. Springs are another power source that apply both the parking brakes and the emergency brakes. There's a whole host of valves that you have to know for the purposes of your CDL air brake test. You can find those in the Air Brakes Explained Simply ebook that's available over at the Smart Drive Test website. It gives you alphabetical all the way from the quick release valves, relay valves, hand valve, foot valve. It'll give you all of the valves that you need to know for your CDL air brake test. It'll also go through the fail-safe systems and the reasons that air brakes won't fail. And then finally, it'll go over trailers as well, and it'll give you separate pre-trip inspections for a single unit, which would be a semi-trailer, a tractor, a truck, or a bus, an RV unit, and then it'll give you a separate pre-trip inspection for truck and trailer. So that all of that is available over at the Smart Drive Test website. And I think that's it. Yes, and there's the book, the ebook you can find over at the Smart Drive Test website. So we'll get back over here, and we'll answer any questions you have. And as I said, the rest of the question and answer period is about any questions you have about passing a driver's test, any questions you have about being a safer, smarter driver, defensive driving, any questions you have about earning a CDL license, getting your air brake ticket, and starting a career as a truck or bus driver. So, my friend Tim, I find it a chore to keep up on BC stuff. It amazes me how much Rick knows about all North American jurisdictions. Thank you, Tim. I appreciate that. And brakes turn motion into heat, then dissipate the heat to bring the vehicle to a stop. And yes, that's exactly what they do. They dissipate the heat into the atmosphere. And this is another reason why you want to have minimum use of the brakes when you're going down big hills, especially over hills like the Coquihalla, the Snoqualmie Pass in Washington State. There's a lot of them in California, West Virginia. There's a reason that the state West Virginia is nicknamed the Mountain State, because you're either going up or down in that state. Okay. And Tim says that would be for juice brakes, not air brakes. Yes, juice brakes are hydraulic brakes. And the reason that we don't have hydraulic brakes on large vehicles is because there simply wouldn't be enough hydraulic fluid in the system to be able to operate a tractor-trailer unit. Whereas with air brakes, you can do that. This is one of the reasons why air brakes have benefits over hydraulic brakes. The other piece of hydraulic brakes is that they will not tolerate leaks in the system. Hydraulic brakes on your car are hermetically sealed, which means that it's like a can of vegetables, right? You have to use the can opener to get open. It's hermetically sealed. An air brake system is the same thing. If you get a leak or an air bubble in a hydraulic system, you have to bleed the lines to get that air out. Otherwise, it won't work. Air brake systems are tolerant to small leaks, so that's another reason that they're used on large commercial vehicles. And the power source is indefinite. As long as that compressor is working on the system, you'll still have air pressure to apply the brakes and hold off the spring brakes, right? Not the spring brakes, the parking emergency brakes, right? Because when you put air into the system, the spring brake chamber has a huge spring on it, and you have to compress that to get the brakes off, the parking brakes off. And so as long as you got air in the system, the parking brakes will remain off. If you lose air in the system, then those will come on automatically. And if you're in danger, then it will automatically become the emergency brakes. Okay? Kirsten, I find a freeze mentally at intersections, trying to understand everything going on. Any tips to be faster, less anxious, and safer at this? I'm still learning. Kirsten, one of the things I would suggest you do at intersections, if you're kind of overwhelmed by bigger intersections, is to start at smaller intersections. So work in residential areas. And when you get more comfortable working at these intersections, then move out to more complex intersections, because as you said, there is a lot going on. The other strategy you can implement in terms of trying to deal with intersections is to be scanning the intersection as you're approaching and categorizing in your head what kind of an intersection is it. For example, is it a complex intersection? Do I have right and left turning lanes? If you've got those, then you've got to be mapping and tracking what's going on in your right and left turning lanes. Do you have advanced greens? Those types of things. Is it a simple conventional intersection? For example, it's just a stoplight at a cross streets with no turning lanes and those types of things. So if you can kind of categorize what's going on at the intersection before you even get there, that might help you as well, Kirsten, in terms of reducing the amount of information that you're trying to process all at the same time when you get to the intersection. Trudes Brown, how are you, my friend? Sign Cutter is here from North Dakota. Fuad, how many lessons do students need to get before taking their road test? Okay, Fuad, usually most students, younger students, kind of, under 25 years old, kind of require kind of 10 to 15 driving lessons to prepare for a driver's test. For every 10 years that you're over 25 years old, you're going to need 10 hours more of training. So if you're 45 years old, you're going to need kind of 25 to 35 hours of training before you go for your driver's test. That's going to kind of help you out a little bit there in terms of driver training. And of course, it depends on the individual student and those types of things as well. Those aren't hard and fast rules, okay? Grace, if brakes fails, what is one supposed to do? Control the steering wheel and what else? Okay, Grace, it's unlikely, remote, I am talking remote, that your brakes are going to fail completely, okay? Because as I said, the braking system on your car is divided into two independent subsystems. So the master cylinder, which is the pump and hydraulic reservoir, it's the reservoir that holds the oil for the brakes on your vehicle, is divided into two chambers. If you take the lid off that, there's two chambers in there. One is for the front brakes, the other is for the rear brakes. All right, so let's say that you have a catastrophic failure of your braking system. So, the Terminator gets underneath your vehicle and is ripping all the lines off and everything is completely failed. If that happens, and the Terminator is not very good and misses the cable, which goes from your parking brake back to your brakes, then you simply, if it's in the center console, then you just pull that up and the vehicle will start to come to a stop because you're manually applying the brakes with the emergency brakes. So the brakes on any vehicle in this day and age, any modern vehicle built in the last 30, 40 years, it's almost impossible, 99.9% impossible chance of the brakes failing because there's so many independent subsystems that they're just not going to happen. Okay, it's not going to happen. So if that's what happens, if the brakes fail, the service brakes completely fail, your brake pedal in other words, then you just pull up on the parking brake and the parking brake will bring the vehicle to a stop. Sweetie, what do you want to know about spring brakes? Okay, they're not spring brakes. Large, powerful springs are just another power source that applies the brakes. And I know that this confuses students who are talking about air brakes because they go into these courses and whatnot. And the instructor's talking about spring brakes and they're talking about service brakes. And the student walks out and goes, oh, is there like 3 brakes on the truck or 4 brakes? No. 1 brake, 3 functions. Okay? So think of it like a claw hammer, right? A good old-fashioned claw hammer. It's 1 tool, but it's got 3 functions, right? I can bang in nails with it, or I can bang things apart, or I can pull out nails with it. So the 1 tool, the claw hammer, has 3 functions. It's the same thing as air brakes. There's 1 brake, 3 functions, and 2 power sources on the brakes to apply the brakes. The 1 power source is air pressure. The other power source is large, powerful springs. So you got 1 brake, 3 functions, 2 power sources. And essentially, service brakes, which is your brake pedal going up and down the road, parking brakes / emergency brakes, because they're one and the same thing. And when you go up and down the road, air pressure holds the springs in the compressed cage position. If you lose air pressure in the system, those springs will come on automatically and act as an emergency brake. When you park the vehicle, you pop the buttons out on the dash, the 4-sided parking brake valve and the trailer air supply valve. You pop them out, you exhaust air into the system, the springs expand and apply the brakes, and this vehicle sits there indefinitely. So that's kind of the spring brake thing. Tim says, cautiously crank on the parking brake and you could swap swap ends. Yes, exactly. And that's an excellent point that Tim makes about the parking brake. If you are using it as an emergency brake, don't just grab a hold of it and just ratchet it up, because what's going to happen is that it's going to click into place and it's going to lock there, and it's going to lock your rear wheels up, because the parking brake only works on the rear wheels. It doesn't work on the front wheels. And exactly what Tim says, if you crank that on, you're going to lock it. So you might want to hold the button down on the top, which may or may not work, so that you can have a little bit of control on it. But just click it up, feel the vehicle come to a stop, slow down, click it up again, click, just go slow and do it cautiously. Because if you just reef on, as Tim said, you could swap ends there, which means you spin out of control. Okay, so Fuad, you've had 8 driving lessons already. How is the driving going? How are you feeling about the driving? What is the feedback that your instructor is giving you? Hall phase, when do people normally retire from truck driving? And how long do they work per day? Really depends on the person, Hall phase. Most of them will go and find something else to do. They'll go and do local work, or they'll become a driving instructor, or those types of things. So there's the nice thing about being a CDL driver is there's lots of opportunity, right? Or they'll go and drive a tour coach, or they'll drive, senior citizens around on their little, out to the winery and those types of things. So, I'm not saying that a lot of truck drivers will just retire, but they'll just go and find something else to do in the industry that's not as stressful as, say, humping a truck up and down the road doing long haul from California to New York every week, because that's hard on you. That's hard on anybody. That's kind of a young man's game. All right, sign cutter, unless you overheat them and they lose their effectiveness. Yes, and so sign cutter, as you just said, the only real failing of any brake system is brake fade. When you overheat the brakes, overuse the brakes, they're going to fail because you're going to melt them into a big pile of goo, and the hubs are going to expand away from the brake shoes, and they're just going to lose their efficiency. They're not going to work anymore. So, but there are auxiliary brakes on all these large commercial vehicles, and effective use of the auxiliary brake will minimize your use of the service brakes and keep you, with braking and going up and down the road. All right, Fuad, may you do YouTube live streams more often, please? I'm thinking I'm going to have to start doing that, Fuad, so we're going to be working on that. Okay, and Margaret's got some advice there about getting a driving test in New York there. Excellent. Brenton, I have my CDL temps for a school bus, and I start this week. That is awesome. Congratulations on getting your temps and getting going there with driving school bus. That is really awesome. Felix, I like the way you explain all those complicated topics. Felix, I've been working on this for a while, and the one about one brake, 3 functions, and 2 power sources, I have been working on figuring that out for a while now, because I have a video here, Air Brakes Explained Simply, and I kind of had it a couple of years ago, and I've been kind of recently thinking, because I've had a lot of students come back and they look at that video and they said, oh, I come out of course and I thought there were 2 braking systems, and I was totally confused. And I'm just trying to simplify the air brake system, because it's a course that is far too complicated. There's simply, in my personal professional opinion, there's simply too much information that students don't need to know anymore. You don't need to know anymore what a manual front wheel limiting valve is. I mean, manual front wheel limiting valves were gone 40 years ago, and but we're still teaching them in courses, and we're teaching automatic front wheel limiting valves when the driver's never ever going to know what one is, or is never going to see one. I mean, why are we still teaching this stuff? There's so much information in the air brake course that is just awful. And I had to laugh about 5 years ago that the province of Alberta here in Canada completely revamped and updated its air brake course to teach people. And I looked at their course, and what they had done is and then in the front they're giving acknowledgement and those types of things, and they're thanking the province of British Columbia. The province of British Columbia's course is like 10 years out of date. I'm just thinking, oh, no wonder why this is never ever getting fixed or ever moving forward. So this is the reason I wrote Air Brakes Explained Simply, was to try and make this more simple, because it's not complicated. The way that it's taught makes it complicated. It's not complicated. Air brakes are not, there's a whole bunch of different parts on air brake systems, but the fundamental system works almost the same as it works on your car. It's not that much different. And, the other problem I see with air brake courses is that they don't give you step-by-step information about essentially downhill braking, for example. They don't tell you, they don't show you that. And that is incredibly important, and I can tell you how to do that step by step. So look at the video on downhill braking in a large vehicle, and that'll help you out as well. Okay. Sapper Daddy, what's your take on disc brakes like the ones on Peterbilts? I think, Sapper, they're coming. And they're better than drum brakes for sure, because they don't experience brake fade in the same way that disc brake or drum brakes do. So there are advantages to disc brakes, because they become more aggressive as you heat them up. The issue with large commercial vehicles is that they haven't quite figured out which materials they need to use to have disc brakes absorb and dissipate the amount of heat that's generated by large commercial vehicles because of the weight of these units. So disc brakes still, I would say that they're still 5 years from perfection, but they're coming, right? It's inevitable. They're better brakes than drum brakes. So it's just a matter of time. Okay. Brenton's, yes, thank you. Some people told me it's like driving my car, but a bigger vehicle. Brenton, that's a little bit of an oversimplification. They are easier to drive for sure, because, all school buses now, most of them are going to be automatic. They're going to be fitted with air brakes and those types of things. But there are, turning, you're really going to have to be careful with turning, because it's such a long vehicle. and there is a great deal of tail swing on these school buses because the wheelbase is so short, and there's like literally there's 15 to 20 feet behind the rear tires, so you get a lot of tail swing on these school buses, and you can get that back end out over the sidewalk and be taking out traffic signs and those types of things. So they are a little bit like that, but there are some other considerations that you need to keep in mind too when you're driving school buses as well. Fuad, my lessons are going well. I wouldn't say 1,000%. I am planning on getting more. I need to make sure I pass on the first attempt. Awesome. Okay, brilliant. Margaret, I think it's best if you contact. Okay, so that's really great as well. Tyson, I had the brakes fail because the brake line blew out. So Tyson, when the brake line blew out, you should have still had brakes on one. You should have had some brakes because, as I said, unless it's the main line coming off the reservoir, as I said, it's divided into two independent systems, one for the front and one for the back. So you still should have had some brakes. It's interesting that you're saying that you completely lost your brakes. All right. Sign cutter, the difficulty I found with disc brakes on the truck I trained in was getting a good visual of the brake pads during my pre-trip. The drums are much easier to inspect. Yes, they are. And that's the other thing, sign cutter, about disc brakes is that drivers can't check them, and they can't, they can check push rod travel, but they can't really check the brake. They can't really adjust anything inside the disc brakes. That's the only failing of disc brakes is that they have to be adjusted by a mechanic, an automotive technician. They can't be checked by the driver. So the only thing that you can check is push rod travel, and I think it might even be difficult to check push rod travel. Like you said, to inspect any of the internal parts of disc brakes, that's challenging as well because it's not really visual, right? They're very much an enclosed system, unlike drum brakes where you can kind of get in behind and you can see the top of the brake shoe. So there are some limiting factors of disc brakes. Brenton, okay, I will be careful with my turning, but here's my question. Why is there 2 air tanks underneath the bus? Okay, so Brenton, the reason that there's 2 air brakes, and you're probably going to be driving newer buses, so they're going to have what's called an air dryer integrated system, okay? On older air brake systems, before ADIS, they had 3 tanks. They had a wet tank, a secondary tank, and a primary tank. And the reason they have 2 air tanks is because the system is divided into a primary and secondary system. Exactly the same as a hydraulic system on your car. So the secondary system runs the front steer tires. The primary system runs the back. So if there's a failure in one system, the other system will continue to work normally, and you will still have brakes and be able to bring the vehicle to a stop. And that's the reason why there's 2 air tanks under there. The division of the system into 2 independent subsystems. And this is why I say that it's very, very unlikely for air brakes to fail, is because of this division of the system into 2 independent subsystems. And the other reason that the air brakes are unlikely to fail is because if they were prone to failure, they wouldn't put them on school buses, because as we know, school buses carry our most precious cargo, which is our children, right? So if air brakes were prone to failure, they wouldn't be putting air brakes on them. So that's the reason as well. And then, of course, that's only one of the fail-safes on an air brake system. The other fail-safe, as I was talking about earlier, is parking emergency brakes. If you lose air pressure in the system, the emergency brakes will come on automatically as the system air pressure drops. And there's a low air warning on the vehicle that will come on when air pressure reaches 60 pounds per square inch. When air pressure reaches 60 pounds per square inch, the low air warning will come on, which is both visual and audible. In other words, you can hear it and you can see it. And you can definitely hear it because it's that most annoying sound in the world. We all hate. So you can't miss the fact that there's low air warning. And when that low air warning comes on, you get over to the side of the road and figure out why you're losing air pressure in the system, whether you ripped an air line off the vehicle or whatnot, or you left one of the drain valves open on the air tanks and it's bleeding air out. But you'll still find out that the air compressor is capable of pumping a lot of air. So that's another fail-safe, because the air coming out of the air compressor is a lot, and the system will tolerate small leaks. So a lot of fail-safes on an air brake system. So again, circling back to getting your driver's test in the wintertime, getting your driver's test during COVID, because we're all COVID crazy right now, and the world is essentially shut down, at least on the eastern seaboard of the United States and in Ontario. And I have a client in the States, and I was going to go down to Houston and do some work down there. And if I want to fly out of Canada into the United States, I have to get a COVID test. I have to get a negative COVID test. The only place I can get tested for flying is in Vancouver, so I have to go to Vancouver. You have to have minimum 48 hours for the test, so I got to spend a couple of nights in Vancouver. The cost of the test is $250. Go to Houston, do the work that I need to do. I need another COVID test to come back, which is another $250. And then when I come home, I have to quarantine for 2 weeks. And now yesterday, the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said that if you go overseas or somewhere else, that you may be stranded. You simply just can't come home, even if you have a negative COVID test. So I have to get in touch with my client tomorrow and tell them that it's not really worth my time coming to Houston. We have to figure out another way to do it. So that's traveling in Canada and the United States and those types of things. So COVID has put a lot of restrictions on getting driver's tests and traveling and those types of things, but it doesn't mean that you can't, right? Especially practicing for your driver's test and whatnot. And I'm encouraging you, for those of you who are going for a driver's test, do it now, because you're much more likely to be able to get a driving test date now than you will in the summertime, when all of this begins to open up. As the vaccine becomes more readily available, it's going to be incredibly backed up. And in my mind, I'm thinking that as long as we've been shut down, and as long as a lot of the DMVs and other test centers have been shut down, it's going to be a couple of years before we see all of this kind of get back to normal. I mean, they are already beginning to push people off. In the province of Ontario, seniors are not required to do driver's tests and those types of things. So I'm really encouraging you to book a test now if you're thinking at all that you're going to go and do driver's tests and those types of things, because it's going to be a bit of time here. All right. Fuad, $250 for a COVID test. Wow, that's crazy. Is that US or Canadian? Fuad, it was both Canadian and American. It was the same price. It was $250 Canadian, and it was $250 American for a COVID test. So plus you've got a couple of nights of hotels, because you have to wait for 40 hours. Well, at least for me, because I don't live in Vancouver. It's a couple of days in Vancouver, so it's a couple of nights hotel as well. So by the time I get done with all the COVID stuff, I'm looking at another $1,000 on top of that. So that's a lot. Jonathan, thank God I passed mine just before the New Year's. Yes, that was really, really prudent on your part, Jonathan, that you did in fact do yours just before Christmas there, because it would be really, really tough now for you to get a driver's test. All right, so for those of you who are going for a driver's test, excellent. We look forward to seeing you next week as well, Tim. And yes, on that note of what Tim just said, next week we're doing defensive driving. I have come up with a new model for defensive driving that I'm going to put out to you, and I am really looking forward to getting your feedback on this defensive driving model that I have conceptualized and put together, because I'm thinking that I need to write it down and put it into a book. So we're going to be doing that as well. All right. Bill, thank you for your videos. Learned a lot. Wish you luck on my road test on the 1st of February. I am shaking. Bill, you're going to do awesome, okay? Remember to breathe. That'll cause your body to relax, and you're going to do awesome. If you have any questions between now and the 1st of February, let us know. We'll definitely help you out. Okay? Yes. Guy, hey bro, I had my driver's test last year and just wanted to thank you for it again, and you are most welcome. We're so glad that we could help you out. And Fuad, COVID is a scam of money. Yeah, well, I have my ideas about it as well. Nathan, what do they check for the medical for your class 3 or 1? It's basically just a quick. There are some couple of things. Are you in the U.S. or are you here in Canada, Nathan? Newfie, hey, I have my class 1 road test upcoming on Friday. Any tips? I still have a little trouble with getting into gear downshifting on a highway. I do some great days and not so good others. Okay, so Newfie, when you're downshifting, slow down to gear down, okay? Make sure that you bring the engine RPM down to 1,000 RPM before you downshift. And if you're going downhill when you're downshifting, bring it down even lower. Bring it down to 700 RPM before you downshift, because when you're going downhill, remember the road speed is going to pick up on you as soon as you drop it into neutral. So you got to slow the vehicle down farther before you downshift. So between now and Friday, if you're getting any driving lessons in that time, really focus on every time that you downshift, bring the engine RPMs down to 1,000 RPMs. If you do that every time, and then you only have to bring it up 200, 300 RPM when you spike the throttle. Okay, and that is really going to help you out in terms of downshifting. Really focus on bringing that RPM down to 1,000 RPM. And then, I don't know what kind of truck you're driving, whether it's a 13 speed, a 15 speed, or an 18 speed. But if you're in a 13 or an 18 speed, when you go from 5th to 4th, because the other thing about downshifting is that you don't have to shift down all the way to the basement, right? You only have to shift down to 4th gear. You only have to demonstrate to the examiner that you shift between high range and low range. So when you go from 5th to 4th, make sure that you get the truck down to 20 kilometers an hour. The truck won't go into 4th gear unless it's going 20 kilometers an hour, okay? So excellent. So you got a 13 speed. So when you're going from 5th to 4th, get it down to 20 kilometers an hour. As soon as you hit 20 kilometers an hour, then it'll shift down to 4th gear. Okay? Every other gear, get it down to 1,000 RPM. If you're going downhill, bring it down even farther before you downshift, and that'll really help. That'll really help you with your downshifting. Bill, thanks. I will have problems with just parking, but your videos, I can't sleep without them. That's awesome. We're so glad we can help you out. Fuad, can you drive with a driver's permit on the highway or freeway? Yes, you can in New York. I don't think there's any restrictions there. Epic, speaking of the air brake diagram found on CDL manual, which typically depicts the one found on a truck, either it's straight truck or tractor trailer, will that also apply to buses, transits, and coaches? Yes, Epic, it's the same one that's on the towing unit. The truck is the same diagram that's on a bus or single unit, any single unit. So whether it's an RV, whether it's a tractor, like a road tractor, or whether it's just a truck, then that's the same diagram, okay? So you're going to have all the same parts. You know, service brakes, spring brakes, relay valves, emergency parking relay valves, quick release valves, all those types of things are all going to be found on the diagram there. Newfie, we actually watched a few of your videos during the in-class part of the course I'm doing. Excellent. Newfie, which driving school are you at that you were watching my videos? That's great. Sign cutter, when I took my test, I went in with the mindset of I'm testing or teaching the examiner. If you're ready to test, then you should feel if you're equal to the examiner. You don't want to be timid. No, you really don't. You sign cutter, you definitely want to have an air of confidence about you that you've done enough, you know, practice and work that you can do that. Okay, Nathan, okay, so you're here in British Columbia then, and you wanted to know what the medical was. It's basically sign cutter. They're going to check your vision. They're going to check your hearing. They're going to make sure that you don't have any health problems, you know, that are going to be able to affect your driving and those types of things. The other thing is that you can get a medical form. If you go into any kind of ICBC office, you can get a medical form, and you can look through that and know that when you go in for your medical with your doctor, whether it's a walk-in clinic or whatnot, it's going to be about $110, $120, maybe even $150 for you to get that medical done, okay? Do you have any concerns about your health? Do you think there's something that might hold you back or whatnot? I mean, it might be something you might want to talk about with your doctor, okay? Canadian Training Institute here in Newfoundland. Oh, awesome. That's great. And I think you're going to do awesome there, okay? Hall face, do you need to buy or rent a truck in order to practice while going for your CDL? Hall face, I usually recommend that you at least take 1 or 2 lessons with a truck driving school, because there's just so much to know on your CDL that you have to have in place. And most places, what am I trying to say? Most test centers, most DMV test centers are going to require you to double clutch, okay? So know that, okay, when you go in for your CDL. There's just a whole bunch of other things as well. When you take driving lessons with a local driving school in a commercial vehicle, they're going to show you where the test routes are and how to get around the test routes and what to be careful of and those types of things. I don't think that I have been on a test center, on a test route anywhere with a commercial vehicle that there wasn't something particular about an intersection that you needed to know. You were only going to get the information from a driving examiner to be able to get that unit around that corner and those types of things. And that goes for school buses, highway coaches, tractor trailer units, straight trucks, anything. There's always some sort of intersection that you kind of got to figure it out and figure out what's going on and those types of things. Peter, thank you for the super chat, my friend. That is awesome. Just a tip for you for giving us all kinds of tips. Thanks, and you are most welcome. Thank you, my friend. That's brilliant. Fuad, also, can you post more driving videos to your channel? This can really help out everyone. Fuad, there's a lot of videos here. And if you leave us a comment, this is the other thing that we've tried to do, and we have other people on the team here who are helping us out. They're answering comments and they're suggesting videos. So if you have any questions at all about driver's tests, passing a CDL, and those types of things, we'll definitely help you out in terms of suggesting videos and getting you going and whatnot. Cybold, when learner's license expired in BC, do you have to retake the knowledge test? No. It depends, and you would need to talk to ICBC about that, because you may get an extension on your learners, but I don't think so. I think that you're going to have to write the test again if you've let your learners expire, especially here in BC, because we haven't been shut down for almost a year now, so you're going to have to probably rewrite your learners again, unfortunately. Hall phase, do you need to practice driving on your own time? Most of the time, Hall phase, when you go to a truck driving school, you are scheduled for a number of lessons depending on what course you're taking, whether it's going to be a 30-hour course or 40 or 50 hours, maybe even 100 hours. And then they're going to take you out, and the examiner is going to, or the examiner, not the examiner, the instructor, the driving instructor is going to be with you for the whole time that you're driving in the vehicle, because you're going to need a licensed driving a licensed CDL person with you in the vehicle so that you can drive around and you can practice. All right. Gandhi, sir, I'm new fan. Can you please help to suggest reference points for parking forward an SUV? My car is always close to one side. Is your vehicle, Gandhi, is your vehicle close to the passenger side, or is it close to the driver's side? I'm suspecting it's closer to the passenger side most of the time. Epic. Speaking of aerohydraulic brakes, is there a separate diagram for them or not? Because in order to drive one, you might need an endorsement for air brakes, otherwise going to get a restriction. Epic, you do need an endorsement for air over hydraulic brakes. The chances of you finding a vehicle that has air over hydraulics is remote. Okay? They're just not there anymore. But yes, you're right. If you do encounter air over hydraulic brakes, you do need an air brake endorsement for that. Schumer, what tips can you give me for downshifting from high box to low box, gear 5 to 4 while in an uphill climb? I keep messing it up. Your videos help me a lot and everything else, and I thank you heaps. High box. So are you, Shumar, are you double clutching when you do that? Because you need to double clutch. When you get the gear selector into neutral, you need to bring it up you need to give it just a little bit of shot of fuel, because you're climbing up, and what's happening is that as you're climbing the hill and you dump it into neutral, your road speed is slowing down a lot more than normal. So you may have to shift at a higher speed, try that, or shift at a lower speed, or shift at a higher RPM. So, you need to kind of experiment with the combinations a little bit all the time. And, you know, when you're going from high range to low range, that's always really, you know, it's tough. And the other thing is it's slow because you're getting it to move from high range to low range, and you may be just moving it too fast. And sometimes that happens when you're shifting. You don't give it time to actually work and let it get down to low range. So what you may need to do is you may need to shift your gear at a higher engine rev and move it slower, move the gear stick slower to the low range, and then slip it into gear, and that might work for you. Give that a go and see if that works for you. Gandhi, my SUV is always close to the driver's side. Thank you for taking my questions. Really honored. Thanks for all your videos. Okay, so Gandhi, Corey will get up the video for you on curb parking. You want the video on curb parking because one of the exercises in that video, Gandhi, is driving along pylons on the passenger side of the vehicle. Because what you're having, I think what's happening with you is that you're moving into a parking space and you're too close on the driver's side because you don't really know where the passenger side of the vehicle is, and you're overcompensating by being too close on the driver's side. The other thing you can do, what was the other thing I was going to suggest? Have a look at the video. Corey will put this video up for you as well on learning to drive an SUV, and that'll give you some tips and strategies as well for better parking with your vehicle there. Gamarine, yes, we're still live. We're still here. Siobhan, if I renew the learner's license before expired, do I have to retake the knowledge test? Thanks for all your videos. You're most welcome. If I renew the learner's license before expired, no, you will not have to redo the learner's test. If you can renew it, you might be able to renew it. I don't know for sure. As again, you would need to get in touch with ICBC or the testing authority in your area, whether it's the DMV or whatnot. Okay. So Corey's put that video up for you. That's awesome. That'll help you out. And yeah, I think if you renew your learners, you won't have to take the test again. Adnan, I'm going to driving school in New York. Do you think an automatic transmission is okay? Driving school. Okay. Are you going to CDL school, commercial driver's license, or is this just for passenger vehicle? And that'll determine my answer for you. So next week, the new defensive driving model that I'm going to present is called Spock 3. Yes, we're going to Star Trek. Space, the final frontier, because space management, for those of you who have been around for a little while and listened to me talk, yes, space management is the most important part of defensive driving. So we're going to talk about Spock 3. We're going to break that down for you and talk about social driving. That driving is an exercise of, it's a social driving exercise that it's a social activity is what I'm trying to say and get out here in some sort of words. So yes, it's a social activity. You need to learn how to drive in a group. Unpredictable actions often lead to crashes, so we need to put in place habits that will keep us safe, regardless of whether that's 1 month from now or 2 months from now or 5 years from now. So we need to put in habits that will keep us safe on the roadways. And we're going to talk about space management, speed management, observation, and communication, and how all of that ties into driving as a social activity, and that space management is the most important component of defensive driving. If you can manage space well around your vehicle, it's less likely you're going to be involved in a crash. So tune in next week. We're going to talk about all of that. All right. Cameron, I failed thrice the driving test in Missouri. I know I'm pathetic. Any suggestions? And first of all, no, you're not at all. So first of all, stop beating yourself up, because lots of people fail the driver's test 2, 3, 4 times. You only fail when you give up, okay? And you haven't given up yet. You're going to be able to do this. So yes, you can do this. And what I would suggest to you is Corey will put the video up on that you failed your driver's test. Now what? Have a look at that, review what you did wrong, and get back on the horse, and you're going to be able to pass your driver's test. Cameron, have you taken a practice driving test with a local driving instructor? Okay, because I would recommend you do that as well. Aiden, okay, I'm driving school in New York. I'm doing automatic transmission. Okay, so you're in New York State. There are a lot of companies that do have automatic transmissions. You're not going to be as employable. If you can do it in a manual truck and you've got the extra time and you've got the determination to do that, even now, I would still encourage you to get your CDL license in a manual transmission. It's going to make you a lot more employable, because the first 6 months of being a CDL driver, it's going to be tough for you to get a job, and you're going to be more employable with those skills, being able to drive a manual transmission. I don't encourage CDL drivers, student drivers, to get an automatic transmission. I mean, unless you're really struggling with the manual transmission, then yes, get an automatic. But if you can do it in a manual, then do it in a manual. Okay? Okay, permaculture, beam me up, Scotty. Absolutely, we're gonna ride the coattails of Star Trek for my defensive driving model. But really, the final frontier, space, the final frontier, really kind of the analogy really kind of ends at that point. But Spock really works. Spock 3 there. So we'll talk more about all of that next week. Scotty, thanks for the videos. I get my first truck lesson tomorrow. Very exciting. That's awesome. So Scotty, just remember, hang on for the first 3 days, because they're going to throw absolutely everything at you for the first 3 days. And then after that, it'll get a little bit easier. All right. Thanks so much. You're most welcome. Jonathan, manual transmission for me feels more fun and interesting. It makes you feel more in control. And absolutely, Jonathan. And I'll just say this as the last point here for tonight. I was talking, the company that I'm working with in the States, a huge company, thousands of trucks. All their trucks are automatics, and they're saying that they're having difficulty with distracted driving and drivers having their focus on driving because there isn't anything for them to do. And I would argue that manual transmissions cause drivers to be more engaged with the driving task, especially when they're driving a commercial vehicle. So that's my take on all of that. So we'll leave that there for tonight. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you've had a driver's test in the last couple of weeks and past, that's awesome. Congratulations. You have a driver's test coming up in the next week or so. Good luck on that. If you have any questions at all, drop us a note, leave us a comment down in the comment section, hit that thumbs up button, or send me an email, rick@smartdrivetest.com. Thank you so much, Corey, for getting up the videos that I suggested and helping everybody out, all the smart drivers, to be safer, smarter drivers. And remember, pick the best answer, not necessarily the right answer. Have a great night. Bye now.